The drive to Riverside took Marcus through parts of the city he had never seen before, despite living there for over 20 years. His black sedan looked absurdly out of place among the run-down apartment buildings, corner stores with barred windows, and streets where children played between parked cars. His driver, James, kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror, clearly uncomfortable with their destination. "Sir, are you certain about this address?" James asked as they turned onto 5th Street. "This neighborhood isn't exactly—" "I'm certain," Marcus replied, though his own doubts were mounting with every block they passed. The contrast between his world and this one was stark. Here, people sat on front steps talking to neighbors, laundry hung from fire escapes, and the smell of home-cooked meals drifted from open windows. It was vibrant and alive in a way that his sterile, wealthy environment never was. The blue house with the white porch sat halfway down the block, distinguishable from its neighbors only by the small garden that bloomed despite the cracked sidewalk and urban decay around it. Flowers Marcus couldn't name burst in brilliant colors from old coffee cans and repurposed containers. Wind chimes made from bottle caps and metal pieces created a soft melody in the morning breeze. "Wait here," Marcus told James, straightening his $5,000 suit as he stepped out of the car. Several people on the street stopped to stare, but not with the recognition he was used to. Here, he wasn't Marcus Wellington, business mogul. He was just another out-of-place rich man in their neighborhood. The wooden steps of the porch creaked under his feet as he approached the front door. Before he could knock, a voice called from inside. "Come in, child. Door's open." Marcus hesitated. The voice was warm and rich, with an accent that spoke of the deep South and generations of wisdom passed down through stories told on front porches just like this one. He pushed open the screen door and stepped inside. The interior was nothing like he had expected. The small living room was immaculate, filled with handmade furniture that showed the wear of loving use. Photos covered every available surface. Children, grandchildren, families spanning decades. The air smelled of sage and something else he couldn't identify, something earthy and ancient. "In here, Mr. Wellington." He followed the voice toward the back of the house. Through a narrow hallway lined with more photographs and what appeared to be certificates and letters of gratitude. The kitchen was small, but spotless, with herbs hanging in bundles from the ceiling and jars of mysterious substances arranged on shelves like a library of remedies. Mama Esther sat at a round wooden table that dominated the room. She was smaller than Marcus had imagined, probably in her 70s, with skin the color of rich mahogany and eyes that seemed to see everything. Her hair was silver white, pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore a simple house dress in deep purple. Her hands, resting on the table, were lined with age but steady. "Sit down, child," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Though I suspect you prefer to be called Mr. Wellington or perhaps Sir?" Marcus lowered himself into the chair, feeling more uncertain than he had since he was a young man starting his first business. "Mrs." he began. "Mama Esther is fine. That's what everyone calls me." Her eyes studied his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. "You have doubt written all over you, Marcus Wellington. Doubt and desperation fighting each other like two dogs over a bone." "I'm here about my son," Marcus said, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "Amara Johnson said you might be able to help him. Amara is a good girl. Brought her little brother to me when the doctors had given up on him." Mama Esther nodded slowly. "Jerome's doing well now. Made honor roll last semester, you know. Hard to believe he was ever paralyzed, watching him run around that basketball court." Marcus leaned forward. "How? How did you help him?" Mama Esther was quiet for a long moment, her eyes never leaving his face. "Tell me about your boy first. Not his medical condition. I already know about that. Tell me about David the person." The request caught Marcus off guard. For months, conversations about his son had focused entirely on spinal cord injuries, nerve damage, and treatment options. No one had asked about David himself in so long that Marcus had almost forgotten his son was more than a medical case. "David is—" Marcus paused, his throat tightening. He was always the light in whatever room he entered. Even as a little boy, he could make anyone laugh. "He's brilliant. Graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, but he never made anyone feel stupid for not knowing something. He taught himself guitar when he was 12 and used to play for hours." "What else?" Mama Esther prompted gently. "He volunteered at a literacy program downtown, taught adults to read on weekends." Marcus's voice grew softer. "He never cared about the money or the business. Said he wanted to find his own way to help people. We argued about it sometimes. I wanted him to take over the company, but he wanted to start a nonprofit. And now," Marcus's hands clenched into fists, "now he stares at the ceiling and barely speaks. The doctors say depression is common with his type of injury, but this is different. It's like he's already given up on living. He won't even try physical therapy anymore." Mama Esther nodded slowly. "The body and the spirit are connected in ways most people don't understand. When one is broken, the other suffers too. Sometimes healing the spirit is the first step to healing the body." "Amara said you have a gift," Marcus said, "some kind of healing power." "I have knowledge passed down through 7 generations of women in my family," Mama Esther corrected. "Knowledge about plants, about energy, about the connections between all living things. Some people call it gift, some call it nonsense. What do you call it?" Marcus considered the question carefully. 3 months ago, he would have called it complete nonsense without hesitation. But 3 months ago, his son could walk. "I call it my last hope," he said honestly. Mama Esther smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Honesty is a good foundation. Now let me tell you what I see when I look at you, Marcus Wellington. I see a man who has spent his whole life believing that control was the answer to everything. You controlled businesses, controlled money, controlled situations, but you can't control this, and it's eating you alive." Her words hit closer to home than Marcus cared to admit. "I also see a man who loves his son more than his own life, but doesn't know how to show it because showing emotion feels like losing control." Mama Esther's voice grew gentler. "And I see a man who's about to learn that the most powerful thing in the universe isn't money or influence or control. It's surrender." "Surrender?" Marcus frowned. "I didn't come here to surrender. I came here to fight for my son. Sometimes fighting means letting go of what you think you know and opening yourself to what you don't understand." Mama Esther stood up and moved to one of her cabinets, pulling out several small bottles filled with different colored liquids. "Your son's body can heal, Marcus Wellington. But first, his spirit needs to remember why it wants to live." She began mixing ingredients in a small bowl, her movements precise and practiced. The mixture gave off a strange, earthy smell that reminded Marcus of rain on forest soil. "What are you making?" he asked. "A tea that will help clear the fog from his mind and reconnect him with his own inner strength. But this isn't a magic potion from a fairy tale. It's medicine that works with the body's own healing energy." She looked up at him. "The real work has to come from you." "From me? But I thought—" "You thought I was going to wave my hands and make everything better?" Mama Esther chuckled. "Healing doesn't work that way, child. Your son needs to feel loved and supported in a way that goes deeper than expensive doctors and private hospital rooms. He needs to see that his life has meaning beyond what his legs can do." She finished preparing the mixture and poured it into a small glass bottle. "Give him a spoonful of this 3 times a day with his meals. But more importantly, you need to be present with him. Really present. Not checking your phone, not thinking about business deals, not trying to fix everything. Just be there. Marcus took the bottle, surprised by how light it felt in his hands. Something so simple couldn't possibly be the answer to months of medical failures. "That's it?" he asked. "That's the beginning," Mama Esther corrected. "The tea will help, but the real healing happens in here." She pressed her hand to her chest, over her heart. "Your son has lost faith in himself, in his future, in the possibility that life can still be worth living. You have to help him find that faith again." "How do I do that?" Mama Esther sat back down, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Start by telling him about the man he used to be, before the accident. Remind him of his dreams, his goals, his desire to help people. Bring his guitar to the hospital. Play the music he loved. Show him pictures of the literacy program he cared about." Marcus nodded, taking mental notes. "And Marcus," Mama Esther continued, "you need to forgive yourself." "Forgive myself for what?" "For not being able to protect him, for not being able to fix this, for being human instead of the all-powerful father you think you should be." Her eyes were kind but unwavering. "Your son doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to be present." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes, something that hadn't happened since the night of the accident. What if it doesn't work? What if he never walks again? "Then you'll love him anyway," Mama Esther said simply. "And you'll help him build a life worth living from wherever he is. But I have a feeling that won't be necessary. David Wellington has more fight in him than either of you realize right now." She stood up and walked him to the door. "Bring him the tea. Bring him your presence. Bring him hope. Do that for 2 weeks, and then we'll see." "What do I owe you?" Marcus asked, reaching for his wallet. Mama Esther shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. But if this works, if your boy heals, I want you to remember something. Remember that the most important gifts in life can't be bought. Remember that sometimes the people who have the least to offer in terms of money have the most to offer in terms of wisdom. And remember to use your wealth to help others the way Amara helped you." Marcus walked back to his car feeling like he was carrying more than just a small bottle of herbal medicine. He was carrying possibility, fragile and uncertain, but real. As James drove him back toward his own world of skyscrapers and boardrooms, Marcus found himself thinking not about stock prices or business deals, but about his son's laugh and the way David used to play guitar until his fingers were sore. For the first time in 3 months, Marcus Wellington had something his money had never been able to buy. Hope that felt like it might actually be grounded in something real. The question now was whether he had the courage to follow through on everything Mama Esther had told him, even the parts that scared him most. The small bottle in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, a reminder that healing sometimes came from the most unexpected places, offered by the most unlikely people. As the city changed around them from run-down neighborhoods back to gleaming towers, Marcus realized that the real journey was just beginning. The first day Marcus gave David the tea, his son barely looked at him. David had grown thinner over the past month, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow. When Marcus offered the small spoonful of Mama Esther's mixture, David turned his head away. "More experimental medicine?" David's voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "Dad, just stop, please." "This is different," Marcus said, settling into the chair beside the bed. For once, he didn't have his phone or laptop with him. For once, he had nowhere else to be. "It's from someone who helped another young man with an injury like yours." David finally looked at him, his expression skeptical but curious. "Where did you get it?" Marcus hesitated. How could he explain his visit to Mama Esther without sounding like he'd lost his mind? "From a healer in Riverside, an old woman named Mama Esther." "A healer?" David's eyebrows raised slightly. Dad, you don't believe in that stuff. You've always said alternative medicine is just expensive placebo effects. Maybe I was wrong about a lot of things, Marcus admitted. It was harder to say than he'd expected. Will you try it? For me? Something in his father's voice made David pause. Marcus looked different somehow, less controlled, more vulnerable. After a moment, David opened his mouth and allowed his father to give him the medicine. It tasted earthy and bitter, with an underlying sweetness like honey mixed with herbs. There, Marcus said, capping the small bottle. Now I brought something else. He reached into a bag David hadn't noticed and pulled out David's guitar, the acoustic Martin that had been gathering dust in his apartment since the accident. David's eyes filled with tears. Dad, I can't. My hands aren't steady enough anymore. The medication makes everything feel clumsy. Just hold it for now, Marcus said gently, placing the instrument across David's lap. Remember when you learned to play? You were 12, and you practiced until your fingers bled. You drove your mother and me crazy, playing the same 3 chords over and over. Despite himself, David smiled slightly. I was pretty awful at first. But you didn't give up. You said music was like another language, one that could say things words couldn't. Marcus pulled his chair closer. You played at your mother's funeral. I don't know if I ever thanked you for that. David's fingers moved instinctively to the guitar strings, muscle memory overriding his conscious doubts. The sound that emerged was tentative but pure, a simple C chord that filled the sterile hospital room with warmth. Tell me about the literacy program, Marcus said. The one you volunteered with. What was that like? Over the next hour, as David talked about teaching reading to adults who had never learned, his voice gradually grew stronger. His fingers found their way around the guitar neck, picking out melodies he remembered. Marcus listened without interrupting, without offering solutions or trying to fix anything. He just listened. This became their daily routine. Marcus arrived each morning with the medicine and stayed for hours. He brought photo albums filled with memories of David's childhood, college graduation, and volunteer work. He brought letters from the people David had taught to read, messages of support that had been arriving at the foundation for weeks. Mrs. Patterson writes here that you helped her read her first novel, Marcus said on the 5th day, reading from a handwritten note. She says she stayed up all night reading Pride and Prejudice because she finally could. David was sitting up straighter now, more alert than he'd been in weeks. The tea seemed to be clearing the fog from his mind, making him more present and engaged. She was so proud when she finished that book, said it was like discovering a whole new world. Maybe you could write back to her, Marcus suggested. Let her know how much her note means to you. From here, what could I possibly say? Thanks for the note. I'm still broken. David's bitterness flared, but it was different now, less hopeless, more frustrated. You could tell her that her success reminds you why the work matters, Marcus said. You could tell her that even though you're going through a difficult time, knowing that she's reading makes you happy. David considered this. Hand me a pen. As the days passed, David began writing letters to all the students he'd worked with. He started asking about current events, about his friends, about what was happening in the world outside the hospital. The guitar became a constant companion, and music filled the room for hours each day. On the 10th day, something extraordinary happened. David was playing a song he'd written in college, his fingers moving confidently across the strings, when he suddenly stopped mid-chord. Dad, he said, his voice strange, I think I felt something. Marcus looked up from the book he'd been reading aloud. What do you mean? In my leg. Just now, when I shifted position. I swear I felt something. David stared down at his legs with wide eyes. It was just a tingle, but... Marcus called for the doctor immediately. Dr. Peterson arrived within minutes, skeptical but professional. He performed the standard neurological tests, pricking David's legs with a pin and checking for reflexes. There does seem to be some response in the right leg, Dr. Peterson admitted, frowning at his charts. But this is highly unusual. Spinal cord injuries like David's don't typically show improvement after this length of time. But it is improvement? Marcus asked, his heart racing. It appears to be. We'll need to run more tests, but yes, there seems to be some return of sensation. The doctor looked puzzled. Has anything changed in David's treatment recently? Any new medications or therapies? Marcus and David exchanged glances. We've been doing some alternative treatments, David said carefully. Nothing that should interfere with his medical care. Over the next few days, the sensation in David's legs continued to strengthen. First it was just tingling, then actual feeling when touched. By the 14th day, when Marcus arrived with the last dose of Mama Esther's medicine, David was able to wiggle his toes. The doctors are calling it unprecedented, David said, tears streaming down his face as he moved his feet under the blanket. They want to study me, write papers about me. They can't explain what's happening. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair, overwhelmed by gratitude and wonder. How do you feel? Scared, David admitted. Scared that it might stop, scared that it might not be real, but also hopeful. For the first time in months, I'm actually hopeful. Dr. Peterson wants to start aggressive physical therapy, Marcus said. He thinks with work, you might regain significant mobility. David nodded, then looked at his father seriously. Dad, I want to meet her. This Mama Esther. I want to thank her. 2 weeks later, David was transferred to a wheelchair for the first time since the accident. His legs were weak but responsive, and the feeling had returned to both of them. The physical therapists were amazed at his rapid progress. Marcus wheeled David up to the blue house with the white porch, James following behind with the wheelchair lift. The garden was even more beautiful than Marcus remembered, bursting with late summer blooms. Mama Esther was waiting on the porch as if she'd known they were coming. There's my boy, she said, her face lighting up as she saw David. Look at you, sitting up tall and strong. Mrs. Esther, David said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, child. Just by being here, by fighting back, by remembering who you are. She walked down the steps and took his hands. How are the legs feeling? Stronger every day. The doctors say with therapy I should be walking within a few months. Mama Esther nodded approvingly. The body remembers how to heal when the spirit gives it permission. You've given yourself that permission. She turned to Marcus. And you, Mr. Wellington? How are you feeling? Marcus realized that for the first time in months, he felt like himself again. Not the desperate, broken man who had first walked up these steps, but someone who had learned something important about love and faith and letting go of control. Different, he said honestly. Better. Good. Now, David, I have something for you. Mama Esther disappeared into the house and returned with a small potted plant. This is sage. It represents wisdom and cleansing. I want you to plant this in your garden when you get home, and every time you see it, remember that healing is possible even when it seems impossible. David accepted the plant with reverence. There's something I want to tell you. Before the accident, I was planning to start a nonprofit to provide free literacy programs in underserved communities. I want to do that still, but now I also want to include funding for people like you, healers who help when traditional medicine falls short. Mama Esther's eyes twinkled. That sounds like a fine use of your family's resources. As they prepared to leave, Amara appeared around the side of the house, apparently visiting Mama Esther as she often did. She stopped in surprise when she saw Marcus and David. Mr. Wellington, she said, is this... My son David, Marcus said proudly. David, this is Amara Johnson. She's the one who told me about Mama Esther. David reached out to shake Amara's hand. Thank you. If you hadn't spoken to my father, I don't know where I'd be right now. Amara smiled. I just passed along information. You and your father did all the hard work. As they drove away from Riverside, David, practicing moving his legs in the back seat of the car, Marcus reflected on everything that had happened. The medical establishment would never be able to explain his son's recovery. There would be skeptics who dismissed it as coincidence or placebo effect. But Marcus had witnessed something profound in that small house, with the blue paint and white porch. He had seen the power of hope combined with ancient wisdom, of love joined with letting go, of healing that worked on the spirit as much as the body. 6 months later, David took his first independent steps across the stage at the opening ceremony of the Wellington Foundation for Holistic Healing and Community Support. The foundation funded both traditional medical research and alternative healing practices, with a special focus on serving low-income communities. Mama Esther sat in the front row, beaming with pride as David walked without assistance to the microphone. Amara sat beside her, now the foundation's community outreach coordinator. Marcus watched from the wings, remembering the desperate man who had once paced hospital corridors, believing money could solve everything. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter with a young woman in a hospital hallway to this moment of triumph and gratitude. David's voice rang clear as he addressed the packed auditorium. Healing comes in many forms, from many sources. Sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places, offered by the most generous hearts. This foundation exists to honor all forms of healing and to ensure that everyone, regardless of their economic circumstances, has access to hope. In the audience, Mama Esther nodded approvingly. She had seen many miraculous recoveries in her 73 years, but this one was special. Not just because of David's restored mobility, but because it had opened a wealthy family's heart to the wisdom and needs of their entire community. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and celebrated, Marcus found himself standing with Mama Esther in the foundation's garden, where David's sage plant had grown into a thriving bush. Do you ever wonder if it was really the tea that healed him? Marcus asked. Mama Esther smiled, her weathered hands gentle on the sage leaves. The tea helped clear his mind and strengthen his body's natural healing response. But the real medicine was love, hope, and the courage to believe in possibilities beyond what the experts said was possible. She looked up at him. Your son was never broken, Marcus Wellington. He was just lost for a while. Sometimes the most powerful healing happens when we help someone remember who they really are. As the sun set over the city, Marcus understood that the true miracle wasn't just his son's recovery. It was the transformation of their entire family's understanding of what really mattered in life. Money and power were tools, but love and community and hope, those were the real foundations of a meaningful existence. David's laughter echoed from inside the building, where he was surrounded by the literacy students who had become his first board members and closest friends. The sound filled Marcus's heart with a joy deeper than any business success had ever brought him. The poor black girl who had approached him in a hospital hallway had given him far more than directions to a healer. She had given him a path back to his son, back to himself, and forward to a life of purpose he had never imagined possible. In the end, the way to restore David's ability to walk had led through places Marcus had never expected to go, into neighborhoods he'd never visited, through wisdom traditions he'd never respected, and ultimately into depths of love and vulnerability he'd never allowed himself to experience. The healing had been complete, but it had healed far more than just David's spine. It had healed a family, opened minds, and created a legacy that would touch countless lives in the years to come.